I'm very glad to join you all this morning for this 2010 National Security Dialogue organized by SPF and supported by the National Security Coordination Secretariat. I'm told that there are over 700 who signed up for this morning's session, and that many more wanted to sign up, but because the hall could not accommodate, they had to be turned away. I think that's a very good sign. Since 2005, we have had 6 such annual dialogues, including today's session. They reflect the close partnership between government and the business community on national security. In previous years, participants had given feedback that these sessions were useful to raise their awareness on pertinent issues concerning national security, and it helped them better prepare their businesses to deal with the evolving security threats. This year's theme is the challenge of a networked 21st century, and you'll have speakers from both the public and private sectors who will update us on the changing landscape in the area of Infocom and supply chain security. We all know that Internet has changed our business models, and while we benefit from it, there is always the looming specter of security challenges because there are ill-intentioned individuals and organizations wanting to exploit its vulnerabilities. With increasing globalization, we also need to protect our extensive supply chains that now stretch over many continents. It is therefore critical that we do not underestimate the threats posed to our Infocom and supply chain security. We need to proactively adopt good practices and measures to protect ourselves. Let me talk a little bit more about these 2 areas from the perspective, especially of terrorism. First, I want to make the point that the terrorism threat is persistent, complex, and always evolving. We all know that terrorists have total disregard for human lives and are not deterred by geographical boundaries. Increasingly, they have used the Internet for recruitment purposes, and before long, they can also expect them to target cyberspace. There is also the fear that terrorism and piracy could converge to threaten maritime supply chains around the world. The media recently reported the detention of a 20-year-old full-time national serviceman under the Internal Security Act. Muhammad Fadil Abdul Hamid was a self-radicalized individual who made online contact with a suspected Al-Qaeda recruiter and wanted to embark on armed jihad overseas. 2 other Singaporeans, Muhammad Anwar Jailani and Muhammad Tahir Shaikh Dawood, were also placed on restriction orders. They too had been radicalized by jihadist ideology. In the region, terrorist activities perpetrated by the Jamaah Islamiyah are still ongoing. In February 2008, JI member Rija Yadri bin Jumari was arrested and detained under the Internal Security Act. At the time of his arrest, Rijal was working with foreign GI elements to revive the clandestine GI network. In July 2008, another Singaporean was amongst those arrested by the Indonesians in Palembang. The terrorist cell there had amassed explosives, materials for planned attacks against both local and foreign targets in Jakarta. When Mas Selamat Kastari was recaptured in Malaysia in 2009, he had been supported by sympathizers in that area. This year, the Indonesians discovered a terrorist training camp in Aceh and found that it had links to JI elements. Just 2 months earlier, Indonesians recovered a map of Orchard MRT station when they raided a suspected terrorist cell in East Jakarta, which gave rise to the suspicion that the terrorists were targeting this station. Now, all these are somber reminders that despite the capture of key personnel, Al-Qaeda and various regional affiliates like the JI have not disintegrated but have fragmented instead into diffused cells and groups. Although the central Al-Qaeda networks have been weakened, its jihadist ideology remains alive. Terrorists make use of the anonymity of cyberspace to spread their ideology, exchange information, and recruit new members. This explains the continued resurgence of terrorism. We also need to remind ourselves that the threat of terrorism is real and right here at our doorsteps in Southeast Asia. Singapore has been and remains an iconic target for terrorists. As a transport and finance hub and home to thousands of multinational corporations, many from the West, we are an attractive target for those who want to strike our Infocom and supply chain infrastructures. We can therefore never overemphasize the need for continued vigilance and whole-of-nation efforts in national security. The government, the businesses, and every individual, all of us, have a part to play to ensure that Singapore does not fall victim to a terrorist attack. Let us consider each of these security threats. Infocom security. First, Infocom security. The Internet, as I said, has totally changed the speed with which businesses are conducted. The Internet has spawned the creation of a virtual reality that has become an integral part of the day-to-day functioning of our real world. But the very technologies that empower us to create and build also empower those who want to disrupt and destroy. The 2010 Semantic State of Enterprise Security Study assessed that 3 out of 4 businesses worldwide were subject to cyber attacks in the past year. Here in Singapore, 2/3 of our businesses have encountered cyber attacks since the beginning of the year. Cyber attacks require little capital or manpower, but the damage done can be severe indeed. The Sasser worm incident in 2004, which you have read about, affected more than 1 million computers worldwide and caused total damages estimated at over $15 million. All the result of a single 18-year-old German student. This incident revealed the ease with which a single individual or a small group can cause disproportionate impact. This year, there was a series of coordinated, well-planned, targeted malware attacks against more than 30 companies, including Google, Adobe, Yahoo, Symantec, and Dow Chemical. In this instance of corporate espionage, hackers exploited security flaws to sneak into the networks of major financial, defense, and technology companies and research institutions. Called spear phishing, this form of targeted attack allowed attackers to steal intellectual property and to gather intelligence. Just 3 weeks ago, you all know that DBS customers were left without banking services for 7 hours. From what was reported, this outage, of course, was not caused by cyber attack or deliberate sabotage. But I mention this because the fact that a flaw in routine maintenance operations could trigger such major problems highlights the interconnectedness and vulnerability of any IT infrastructure. As was the case of the Sasser worm, a seemingly small section or seemingly small action can have a disproportionately large impact. This incident reinforces the importance of fortifying IT infrastructure and ensuring that robust contingency plans and preparations are in place. Such cyber attacks are not just limited to businesses. It can be directed at our telecommunications networks, maritime navigational systems, banking databases, stock exchanges, to name a few, which will severely damage the overall economy. In 2007, some of you will know that Estonia suffered denial of service attacks on its IT infrastructure, causing disruptions to commerce, limiting banking transactions, and paralyzing government networks. Defense and military networks can also be subjected to cyber attacks. In 2008, South Korean army officers were hit with spyware alleged to have originated from North Korea. The Mumbai terrorist incident, which we focused on last year's dialogue, relied not only on guns and grenades, but also GPS and phones using VoIP, Voice over Internet Protocol technology. In today's world, acts of terror can come not only from a few extremists wearing suicide belts and vests, but also from a keystrokes on the computer. We can say it's a weapon of mass disruption. Turning to supply chain security. A terrorist attack can manifest itself in many forms as terrorist organizations seek out points of vulnerabilities where they can inflict maximum damage. Today's global economy is served by an integrated supply chains, and any serious disruption to maritime commerce and shipping lanes will cause dramatic and unpredictable turbulence the whole system. Mr. Rohan Gunaratna, local terrorist expert, had predicted as early as 2003 that the hardening of land aviation targets since 9/11 attacks would shift the threat to maritime targets, especially commercial shipping. The main vulnerability is the ease with which large, slow-moving oil tankers and cargo ships can be targeted by fast, explosives-laden dinghies or speedboats on suicide attacks. That is not a far-fetched scenario. There's increasing incidence of piracy and maritime terrorism in recent years. Case in point is the Somali pirates who have been able to board and hijack large vessels, including oil supertanker in 2008. In 2010, 8 ships were hijacked by pirates within a single week. The Somali pirates have gradually widened their range of operations conducting piracy as far south as Mozambique, in southern Africa, and near the coast of India. There were also indications that a terror group was planning attacks on oil tankers in the Straits of Malacca earlier this year. Now, you can imagine that an attack that closes the Malacca Straits to the Singapore port, even temporarily, will not only cause civilian casualties and extensive damage to infrastructure, but have a disproportionate impact on global trade. There will be ripple effects on regional economies. So, it is imperative that all of us do our part. Previous attacks in cyberspace and supply chains have shown us that security breaches can have grave impact on multiple sectors of society. It is vital that we work together to strengthen any weak links in our security strategy. This whole-of-nation approach includes engaging business leaders to work with other businesses and with government to achieve maximum security. Businesses and companies are urged to play their part to secure the operations as well as the information and communication networks. I think this requires a fundamental shift in our outlook. We cannot simply carry on with business as usual, but must ingrain in ourselves and in our organizations what I would call a security mindset, and to put in place plans to prepare for major incidents to ensure that businesses can continue with minimal disruption. Few businesses can survive a prolonged cyber attack that prevents them from communicating with customers and staff or results in the theft of confidential business information. A company also cannot last long if it is unable to establish a reliable supply chain, ensuring supply of raw materials to its factory and delivery of products to customers. In short, we need to see proactive investment in security as a sound, long-term business strategy. Such investments will boost a company's image, its competitiveness and attractiveness as a sure business partners of business continuity. To conclude, let me say that the nature of threat evolves every day. Therefore, there is no room for complacency, and both the public and the private sectors need to work together to ensure that Singapore is not only considered the easiest economy to do business in, as indicated in the World Bank's Doing Business 2010 report, but also as one of the most secure economies in which to invest. We need to keep that up. I look forward to a fruitful panel discussion and sharing session with you later. Thank you very much.